Hi there and welcome to MTG Kitchen Table. This is our first video. It's a deck tech for the Rakdos block. Theros has just come out, and this is kind of the idea that we have for a Rakdos aggro deck. Aggro and Rakdos was the first thing that I started playing when I got into Magic. Obviously it's just quick creatures, kill your opponents quickly, burn them to death, and try to kill your opponent before they kill you. It's a fun way to play, a way that's really easy for beginners to understand with not very complex cards, but yet very effective cards. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start off with the land base. In the deck we have 8 Swamp. Swamp is the heaviest color that we're devoted to in this deck, running cards like Desecration Demon that have double Swamp and its mana cost. It's just important to get out there. We always want to hit the Swamp base. That's critical to most of our cards and spells. Then that brings us to our mountains. We have 7 basic mountains, which are just important, one less than the Swamp, but we still want to really try to hit our mountains. We have cards that really need that red drop in it, such as Dreadbores or Madcap skills, which we really want to be able to have access to on turn 2, and so we want the mountains as well. We're almost as happy with pulling a mountain and a mountain on turn 1 as we would be with a swamp and a mountain. So then that brings us to our next 2 cards, which are the Rakdos Guildgate and obviously the Blood Crypt. The Guildgate comes in tapped, but it does give us access to our red and black mana, so it's really important there. It fixes all the problems, and obviously Blood Crypt is the preferred. We can shock ourselves and bring it in untapped and go ahead and play whatever we want, giving us access to the colors we need. And currently the Theros block is the only one that's out. I think in the Return to God series they're going to have a scry land, which are popular, that come into the battlefield tapped and you scry one. So when that comes out, I'll replace the Guildgate with whatever card that is. But for now, the Guildgate and the Blood Crypt do just fine in fixing the mana base. They're both a 4 of, and so it's just really good cards. That brings your land total to 23, which I think is good for an aggro deck. You hit the lands you want. There's nothing worse than missing your land drop, and yet you don't get flooded out. So I think 23 is definitely a good number to have for this type of deck. Then we move on to our creature base, which is the standard for anybody running Rakdos. The first 2 are the Rakdos Cackler and the Rakdos Shred Freak. The Rakdos Cackler is our 1-drop, one of my favorite cards within the series. From Return to Ravnica. It's a black or a red, so you can play it your first turn as long as you have a land, and you can unleash it, and it's a 2/2 for 1, which is just a wonderful card. In this deck you're not really worried about blocking. The unleash ability doesn't allow you to block, but you're not really worried about it, so you're happy to get that 2/2 on turn 1. Then that brings us to our Rakdos Shred Freak, which is 2 red or 2 black or any combination in between. And it's a 2/1 with haste. We really like creatures with haste in this deck because obviously we're trying to push as much damage as we can as quick as possible, but also this deck is designed to have enough reach for mid-range and late game, and sometimes having the creature with haste after we get a Master of Cruelties to come through, which is what this deck is based off of, you're able to win with just a simple haste creature, and so that's why we really like the Rakdos Shred Freak. It's good early on, and it works well for us in late game as well. That brings us on to the next 2. Oh, and if I didn't say, those are both a 4 of. Great, wonderful cards. And that brings us next to the Thrill Kill Assassin and the Mogus's Marauder. The Thrill Kill Assassin is very versatile in the deck. It has Death Touch. It's a 1/2 that you can also unleash to block, or unleash to make it a 2/3. I like this card because it's pretty much the only type of blocker that we really use, and that's only if you choose to. We like creatures with Death Touch because we want them to have as few of creatures as possible in this deck, because we're running a bunch of kill cards alongside Desecration Demon and Master of Cruelties. So if they're sacking something to your Thrill Kill Assassin, that means they don't have that later on to sack to your bigger creatures and much scarier creatures. And it's just a good way to push damage. A lot of people don't want to block a 2-1 or a 1-2 with Death Touch. And so it's an easy way to get damage through early on in the game. That is a 2 of in this deck, just because of the way the math worked out. So, good card, I like it, you should definitely run it. Then that brings us to the all-star of the smaller guys, in my opinion, which is the Mogus's Marauder. It's a 2-2, costs 3, that when it enters the battlefield, X target creatures gain Intimidate and Haste until the end of turn, where X is your devotion to black. Luckily, all the creatures in our deck at least have 1 mana symbol of black, meaning that all of our creatures will have Intimidate and Haste, whatever's on the battlefield. This works really well if you have a Master of Cruelties out and they're not playing a black-red. You can obviously get in with a swing, drop their life total to 1, and then finish them the next turn. Or if you just have a bunch of little aggro guys out there, you can get in for a bunch, and you're just doing wonderful things. There's 3 of this guy, and he's just an all-star when it comes to the aggro, attacking, getting through, because Intimidate, in a lot of instances, he's not going to be able to be blocked, and he makes your whole board state almost unblockable for a turn, which in an aggro deck is a wonderful thing to have. From there, we move on to the 2 win conditions, I would say, of the deck. The first one being Desecration Demon, who is a 6/6 flyer for 4 mana. 2 black and 2 colorless. He can be tapped if your opponent sacrifices a creature and then you put a +1/+1 counter on him. So they can slow you down with him by sacking their creatures to him and making him stronger, which is honestly okay with you because he's just getting bigger, and so the turn you do get a swing in with him, they'll be taking a lot of damage. This works really, really well when it's paired with the Master of Cruelties, because if you have a Desecration Demon on the board and a Master of Cruelties on the board, if they sack to your Desecration Demon, they're putting themselves at risk of dying to your Master of Cruelties, and if they don't sack to your Desecration Demon, well, then you're hitting in for a bunch of damage, more than likely over their head, which Master of Cruelties himself is a wonderful card. He is a mythic creature, but he's not legendary, so you can have as many of him on the field as you're able to play. He has First Strike and Death Touch, which means he's not only a wonderful blocker, they have something coming in, you hit it for 1, but it has Death Touch, so that's all you need, and you can kill any creature card that way. His ability, though, is pretty crazy. He can only attack alone, so that's obviously his downside. But whenever he attacks and isn't blocked by a player, that player's life total becomes 1, and he doesn't actually ever assign combat damage. So Master of Cruelties can't finish the game himself, but in late game situations, if they've been able to control the game a little bit, if you're able to drop their life total to 1, there's a ton of haste creatures and burn cards in this deck that allow you to finish them off either that same turn or the next turn. Same turn if you're running a burn card, and next turn if you have a haste creature. And so it's a really good card, works really, really well together. They're a dynamic duo. Demons in this deck are just the really, really powerful thing, and that's kind of what gives this deck its flavor, is the fact that it's running demons, it's running kill cards that just destroy your enemy creatures. So and those are both a 4 of. That rounds out the creatures, but brings us next to our instants, sorceries, and enchantments. The first 2 we have are 2 of the best kill cards in the game, Hero's Downfall and Dreadbore. You're running 4 of both. Hero's Downfall is 2 black and a colorless, and it destroys a target creature, planeswalker, at instant speed. Wonderful card. Shouldn't have to explain much. You always want to be able to do that. And then you have Dreadbore, which is destroy target creature, planeswalker again, and it only costs a red or a black. So when you're running 8 kill cards that can destroy target creatures or planeswalkers, you don't actually really feel like you have to save every Dreadbore that you have or every Hero's Downfall. Because you have so many in your deck, you're able to wipe out some of their even smaller creatures and push more damage that way, and still know that you're going to pull another one to finish off if they pull something big. Really wonderful cards. Paired next to Desecration Demon and Master of Cruelties, it just, the synergy works really, really well together. So 4 of on both of those there. Okay, so then the next cards you're running are Madcap Skills and Lightning Strikes, and these are both a 4 of as well. Lightning Strikes, 3 damage to target creature or player for 2 mana, which is obviously a good thing. I like to save these since we have so many kill. If we ever get through with a Master of Cruelties, we can finish them off with a Lightning Strike same turn. Or we can just use it as burn for our aggro guys when we're pushing damage, and it's just a wonderful thing to have. That brings us to Madcap Skills. Some people like it, some people don't. It's a enchantment that your creature gets +3/+0 and can't be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. So, some people argue, well, if they shock it or kill it, you're getting 2 for 1, and that's true. But my argument is, if you just get in with it one time, it's done the same effect as a Lightning Strike would do. And yet, if they don't kill you right off the bat, then they've got something really, really heavy coming their way. Honestly, a good way to win is just turn 1 Rakdos Cackler, turn 2 Madcap Skills, and you've got a 5/2 coming in at their face, and they more than likely don't have 2 creatures, especially if you went first, and you're just doing really good things, and it's something that they have to answer quickly. And this card also works really well with Master of Cruelties. He doesn't make Master of Cruelties any more effective, as in their life total will still only drop to 1, but he makes it harder to block. If they have to block with 2 creatures and they only have 1 creature on the board because you've been killing them, then you can drop their life total to 1 relatively easily. Oftentimes I've played Master of Cruelties and then put a Madcap Skills on them, swung in, and then Lightning Striked, within the 2 turns, and it's just a great way to win. Feels great to take them out that way. So that rounds out the main board of the deck. So that brings us to our sideboard cards. The first 2 sideboard cards up are Mizzium Mortars and Underworld Connections. Mizzium Mortars we're running 4 of. Mizzium Mortars we're running 2 of, and it deals 4 damage to a target creature you don't control. The reason this is in here is honestly for cards like Blood Baron of Vizkopa, where it's a 4/4 and it has protection from black. So our normal kill cards or burn cards, like Lightning Strike or Dreadbore or Hero's Downfall, wouldn't normally be able to hit that card because of its protection. But with Mizzium Mortars, we can get in the damage, kill that creature, and not have to worry about it. So it's kind of a specific card. It works well also against, Loxodon Smiters and other things like that. But really is for those pro-black creatures to still have a removal for them. Running 2 of in the deck. This brings us to Underworld Connections. It's an enchant land where you tap it, pay a life, draw a card. Card draw has always been one of the most powerful mechanics in the game of Magic, just being able to draw into your deck, find the answer, and then be able to finish them off with whatever your win condition is. So paying a life is relatively not important to a Rakdos deck, and it's easily worth the card draw. Especially since we can play so many of our cards so quickly, we want to be able to have more options come the future, and it's a 3-drop card, so you can start doing that pretty early. And that's a 2 of in their deck. This brings us to our next sideboard cards, which are the Whip of Erebos and the Grey Merchant of Asphodel. First, the Whip of Erebos we're running 2 of in the deck. Creatures you control have lifelink, and then you can tap it and pay for 2 which are black. To return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield, it gains haste, and then you exile it at the next end step. This is a good card against 2 groups. First off, it's really good against aggro, because if you get it out there, your creatures having lifelink really gives you a a one-up against other aggro decks, because oftentimes they have just enough early swings to burn you, you know, turn 5 or whatever. And if you can get your creatures to have lifelink, you gain just enough life to live, and you can then begin to take control of the game. And it's also really good against control decks where, you know, you get Supreme Verdict after you had put all your stuff on the field. Being able to whip that stuff back into play, gain some life, and then possibly do more damage to them. It's just a really good thing to have against control, very effective in its uses, and it's very versatile. Then you also have the Gray Merchant. He's a powerful card. All of our creatures in this deck are running at least 1 devotion to black. And when he enters the battlefield, you gain X life equal to your devotion to black, and they lose X life. So just say you had a Rakdos Cackler and a Shred Freak on the field, and you drop this guy. You gain 5 life, and they'll lose 5 life. And then you've obviously got some very nasty creatures. He's a 2/4 body, so he's kind of a good blocker in a lot of ways. But really, just his ability of when he enters the battlefield makes him worth his weight against a lot of decks. Definitely mid-range type of stuff. I can see him coming in after you have several guys on the field. You drop them, and then they're just toast because you've aggroed them out before that. This brings us to 2 of our best, I think, control cards. Control is one of our hardest matchups in this deck, just because we have so much kill and so many creatures that if they're not playing creatures, then our kill cards are kind of null. And so you can easily side these in for a couple of them. The first is Rakdos Return. Deals X damage to target opponent, and that player discards that many cards. Something that makes them lose cards and lose life is really effective against control. Limiting the number of options they have to control the game is a good way for you to be able to play more of your stuff and get in for the win. And at the same time, you're dealing damage, which is obviously the goal of this deck. And then Slaughter Games. Rakdos Return you're running 2 of. And then Slaughter Games you're going to be running 3 of, just because the card is so dang effective. It can't be countered by spells or abilities, and you name a card, and then you search that opponent's graveyard, hand, and library for any number of cards with that name. It's a non-land card. And then that player exiles them and shuffles his library. So what I always do here, the first thing I do is I get rid of Sphinx's Revelation. You get rid of their card draw, and you get rid of their life gain, and you can pretty much win the game if you get a Slaughter's Game and then you name Sphinx's Revelation before they're able to effectively use it. And then you get rid of all of them. Generally they're running 4, and so it's just a good way to get rid of a bunch of their cards and access to other cards. And then you can, with the other ones, you can name, you know, Supreme Verdict and all that type of stuff. It just keeps getting better after you get rid of the Sphinx's Revelation. But you definitely want to run this card. You want to draw it, so that's why I have 3 of them in the sideboard. It's just a crucial card against control, and it's great that it can't be countered itself. Wonderful card for that type of matchup. Finally, that brings us to Erebos, God of the Dead, and Liliana of the Dark Realms. Let's start with Erebos. It's an indestructible 5/7 4-drop. You have to have 5 devotion, but it's okay because most of our creatures are running at least 1 black devotion. And then the crucial part about it is your opponents can't gain life. Like I said earlier, life gain is one of the hardest things to stop when you're an aggro deck. Oftentimes it puts them out of your reach, but Erebos is a good way to answer that. It's just not allowing them to gain life, and it's indestructible, so it's relatively hard for them to get rid of. They can't Supreme Verdict it away. They pretty much have to have an exile enchantment card in order to deal with it most times. And so And then it also has the pay 2 mana, pay 2 life, and then you draw a card. Again, card draw can be important, so if you're in a situation where you want to use that, you can. And then if you have the devotion to turn it into a creature, you've got an indestructible 5/7, which is just a wonderful thing to have. And then finally, that rounds us out with Liliana of the Dark Realms. I like her. I always like having at least one Planeswalker in the sideboard. If anything, they can always serve as a distraction for your opponents. Your +1, you can search for a swamp. In this case, that allows you to get your Blood Crypts as well. Sorry about that. Search your and then put it into your hand, shuffle your library, that type of things. You can give your creatures +X, or their creatures -X, which is a good way to deal with indestructible creatures that they may have, because minusing out a creature isn't the same thing as destroying it, and once its power and toughness becomes 0 or less than 0, the creature dies. So it's a good way to deal with indestructibility. And then I don't know if you'll ever get to the mana symbol or her -6, and if you do, that's a good thing, but all of your swamps can tap for 4 swamp. And so you just have a ton of mana. If you're running that next to a Rakdos return, things can get really crazy. For each swamp you tap, they're taking 4 more. It's just a ridiculous combination. And you're running 1 Erebos and 1 Liliana in both in the sideboard, and that ends the sideboard for the Rakdos deck tech. I hope you've enjoyed. This is our first video. Leave your comments below. Hit the like button if you want. If you don't like it, well, just keep that to yourself. You don't have to hit the dislike button. But you know, if you don't like the video, go ahead and dislike it. Views are important to us. Give us your critiques, your critics. Put comments below what you think we could add to the deck. If you like the flavor of the deck, just whatever. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. And thank you for watching MTG Kitchen Table.